The space station called Harmony's Edge floated in the darkness of space. It was a huge structure made of metal and glass, spinning slowly around a giant planet made of gas. Thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds came here every day to trade, talk, and do business. The station was supposed to be neutral ground, a safe place, a peaceful place. The peace, like everything else in the galaxy, had its limits. Park. Dohan walked through the lower merchant district with his wife Quan, Mireille, and their daughter Yuna. They were human traders from Earth, one of the newer species to join the galactic community. Humans had only been traveling between stars for about 200 years. Compared to other species who have been doing it for thousands of years, humans were still considered children themselves. Dohan was a tall man with tired eyes and strong hands. He had spent 20 years moving goods between worlds, always trying to give his family a better life. His wife Mireille was smaller but had a sharp mind for business. Together, they ran a modest trading company that specialized in earth foods and medicines. It was honest work, simple work, but their greatest treasure was walking a few steps ahead of them. Park. Yuna was 7 years old. She had her mother's bright eyes and her father's curious nature. Everything on the station amazed her. The different aliens walking past them, the strange sounds, the colorful lights. For a child who had spent most of her life on cargo ships and small colonies, this busy station was like a wonderland. A vendor nearby had set up a display of holographic lights. They danced in the air like fireflies, changing colors and shapes. Yuna stopped walking and stared at them with her mouth open. They were beautiful. She had never seen anything like them. Without thinking, she stepped closer to watch. Her parents were just a few steps behind her, talking about their next shipment. They did not see their daughter drift forward into the flow of foot traffic. Yuna also did not see the tall figure walking toward her. Commander Tyrith Voss was a Kelvari, one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. The Kelvari had 4 arms, green scales like a lizard, and cold amber eyes that seemed to judge everything they looked at. They stood taller than most species and walked like they owned every piece of ground. They stepped on in many ways. They did. The Kelvari had been running the Unified Council for 300 years. They made the laws. They commanded the peacekeepers. They decided who could trade and who could not. Other species learned to bow to them, to step aside when they walked past, to never look them in the eye for too long. Commander Voss was especially proud of her position. She had served the Council for 60 years and believed deeply that the Kelvari were meant to rule. Other species existed to be managed, controlled, put in their place. Humans were the worst of all, in her opinion. They came from a terrible world filled with fire, ice, storms, and predators. Their bodies were built to survive damage that would kill most other beings. They ate plants and animals. They needed strong gravity to stay healthy. They could run for hours without stopping. They healed from wounds that would be fatal to any civilized species. The galaxy called them Deathworlders. And Commander Voss thought they were disgusting. She was walking through the merchant district on her patrol when something small bumped into her leg. She looked down and saw a human child standing there, eyes wide, staring up at her. Yuna had been so focused on the lights that she walked right into the Kelvari officer. She immediately knew she had made a mistake. The alien was huge. Her scales were dark green, almost black. Her 4 arms were covered in armor, and her eyes looked down at Yuna like she was looking at an insect. "I'm sorry," Yuna said quickly. Her voice was small and scared. "I did not see you." Commander Voss felt rage building in her chest. A human child had touched her, had bumped into her like she was nothing, had dared to exist in her path. Filthy Deathworlder spawn. Voss hissed. She raised one of her armored hands and struck Yuna across the face. The blow was brutal. The metal gauntlet hit the child's temple with a crack that echoed through the corridor. Yuna flew backward and hit the ground hard. Blood immediately began pouring from a deep cut on her head. She did not cry. She did not make any sound at all. She just lay there, her small body crumpled on the cold metal floor. For a moment, the entire corridor went silent. Every being nearby stopped moving. They stared at the scene. A child bleeding on the ground. An officer standing over her with clenched fists done. Then Murray screamed. The sound came from deep inside her, a mother's cry of horror and rage. She ran forward and dropped to her knees beside her daughter. Blood was everywhere. Yuna's eyes were closed. For a terrible moment, Murray thought her child was dead. Dohun moved fast. He rushed toward his family, his heart pounding, his mind trying to understand what had happened. When he saw Yuna's bloody face, something changed inside him. Something dark and old and dangerous woke up. He looked at Commander Voss. The cavalry officer drew her sidearm and pointed it at him. "Stay back, human. Your kind should teach your young to know their place." Doan stopped. Not because he was afraid of the weapon. He stopped because Yuna needed him. His daughter needed him more than he needed revenge. He knelt beside Myrey and gently touched Yuna's neck. There was a pulse. She was alive. But she needed medical help immediately. "Please," Myrey begged, looking around at the dozens of aliens standing nearby. "Someone help us. Please. She is just a child." No one moved. They all looked away. Some pretended they had not seen anything. Others simply did not care. Station security arrived a few minutes later. There were 4 of them, all from a species called the Vorten. They had blue skin and 3 eyes, and they served the council as peacekeepers on the station. Their leader looked at the scene. He saw the bleeding child. He saw the human parents holding her. He saw Commander Voss standing with her weapons still drawn. "Commander," the security chief said carefully, "may I ask what happened here?" "The human child attacked me," Voss said calmly. "I defended myself." Dohan's head snapped up. "She bumped into you. She is 7 years old. She did not attack anyone." "Your word against mine, Deathworlder," Voss replied. She holstered her weapon. "And we both know whose word matters more." The security team escorted Commander Voss away. They bowed to her as she left, treating her with respect and honor. They offered the Park family nothing. No medical assistance. No report. No justice. Myrey held her bleeding daughter and wept. "Why is no one helping us?" The security chief finally looked at her. He seemed uncomfortable, even ashamed. But he did not offer help. "The commander has diplomatic immunity," he explained quietly. "She is a high-ranking officer of the cavalry military, serving the Unified Council. Our laws do not apply to her. There is nothing that can be done." "Nothing?" Dawn's voice was quiet. Too quiet. "She nearly killed my daughter. And you tell me there is nothing to be done? I am sorry. I truly am." The chief looked at the ground. "But this is how things are. The cavalry are powerful. Humans are new. You do not have the standing to challenge her. Any complaint you file will be ignored. Any request for justice will be denied." He paused. Then he added, almost as a warning, "You should leave this station. Take your daughter and go home. Forget this happened. For your own safety." Dawn picked up Yuna carefully. Her blood soaked into his shirt. She was so small, so light, so innocent. She had done nothing wrong. She had simply been a curious child looking at pretty lights, and for that, she had been beaten by an armored soldier. Myrey stood up beside him. Her eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was set. She was angry, angrier than she had ever been in her life. "We need to find a medical center," she said. "Now." They walked through the corridor toward the human quarter of the station. As they passed Commander Voss being escorted the other way, Do-hun looked at her. Their eyes met. Voss expected to see fear. That was what she always saw when lesser species looked at her. Fear and submission. The natural order of things. But Do-hun's eyes held something different. Something she had never seen from a human before. Something that made her scales twitch and her hearts beat faster. It was a promise. A cold, patient, certain promise. She did not understand it then. She would not understand it until it was far too late. The Parks found a human medical center in the station's lower levels. The doctors worked quickly. Yuna's wound was deep, but not fatal. She needed 12 stitches to close the cut on her temple. She had a mild concussion. She would recover fully, at least physically, mentally, emotionally. The scars would be different. When Yuna finally woke up, she saw her parents standing beside her bed. Her father was holding her hand. Her mother was crying silently. "Daddy," Yuna whispered. "What happened? Why does my head hurt?" Do-hun squeezed her hand gently. "You had an accident, little star. But you are going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay." It was a lie. He knew it was a lie. But he would make it true. Whatever it took. Whatever it cost. He would make it true. Outside the medical center, news of the incident was already spreading. Someone in the corridor had been recording video when it happened. Within hours, that video would reach Earth. Within days. It would be seen by billions of humans across dozens of worlds, and then everything would change. But for now, in that small medical room, a father simply held his daughter's hand and promised her that she was safe. That was all that mattered. That was everything. The video spread like fire through dry grass. 17 different beings in that corridor had been recording when Commander Voss struck Park Yuna. Some recorded for fun. Some recorded for security. Some recorded because they never knew when something interesting might happen on a busy space station. None of them expected to capture something that would shake the galaxy. Within 3 hours, the footage reached human networks. Within 6 hours, it was on every major news channel on Earth. Within 12 hours, every human colony in the galaxy had seen it. A 7-year-old girl. A massive armored alien. A brutal strike. A child falling. Blood on metal floors. And then the words, spoken clearly in a language every translator could understand. Filthy Deathworlder spawn. Humans watched. And humans remembered. 3 days after the incident, Park Do-hun, Quan Mireille, and little Yuna returned to Earth. They landed at the Seoul spaceport on a gray morning. Yuna still had bandages on her head. She was quiet during the entire journey. She did not ask questions. She did not look out the windows. She just held her mother's hand and stared at nothing. The scars on her skin would heal. The scars inside her would take longer. News reporters were waiting at the spaceport. Hundreds of them from every country on Earth. They wanted interviews. They wanted statements. They wanted to turn a family's pain into stories and ratings. Do-hun pushed through them without speaking. He had nothing to say to reporters. Nothing that would matter. Nothing that would bring justice. But others were already speaking. Protests erupted across Earth. Millions of people marched in the streets of every major city. They carried signs with Yuna's face on them. They shouted demands for action. They called for the Unified Council to punish Commander Voss. The Council's response came quickly. "We have investigated the incident on Harmony's Edge," the official statement read. Commander Tyrith Voss acted within her rights as a diplomatic officer. The human child failed to show proper respect for a council representative. While the commander's response may have been excessive, no laws were broken. Commander Voss has diplomatic immunity. This matter is closed. But it was not closed. Not even close. The Calvary government made their own statement one day later. They announced that Commander Voss had been promoted to the rank of Senior Commander. She was being celebrated as a hero for maintaining order and disciplining unruly Deathworlder behavior. They released images of a ceremony where Voss received medals and honors. She stood tall and proud, surrounded by cheering Calvary officials. She smiled for the cameras. She gave speeches about the importance of keeping lesser species in their place. The galaxy watched. Humans watched, and deep inside military headquarters on Earth, decisions were being made. Admiral Choi Han-soo sat in his office aboard the carrier Indomitable. The ship was massive, one of the largest in the United Earth Defense Force. It floated in orbit above Earth, a constant reminder that humanity had learned to build weapons as terrible as any in the galaxy. Han-soo was an old soldier. He had gray hair, deep lines on his face, and eyes that had seen too much war. He had fought in 3 major conflicts during his career. He had lost friends, soldiers, and parts of his own soul. He understood violence better than most people ever would. He also understood when violence was necessary. On his desk was a small screen showing the video. He had watched it many times now. Each time, he felt the same cold anger building in his chest. A child. They had hurt a child, and they had been rewarded for it. He pressed a button on his desk. "Get me Commander Kang Ji-won, Priority 1. Commander Kang arrived within the hour. She came alone, walking into Han-soo's office with the quiet confidence of someone who had done things most people could not imagine. Kang Ji-won was 53 years old. She had gray streaks in her short black hair and a thin scar running down her left cheek. She commanded the 1st Reconnaissance Division, a special operations unit that most people had never heard of. Those who had heard of them called them the Quiet Ones. They were the best soldiers humanity had ever produced. Trained to move through enemy territory without being seen. Trained to kill without making a sound. Trained to do the jobs that regular soldiers could not do. Han-soo gestured for her to sit. She remained standing. "You have seen the video," he said. It was not a question. Everyone has seen it. The Council has refused to take action. Diplomatic immunity. They have advised us to accept this as a learning opportunity for proper conduct in civilized space. Kang said nothing. Her face showed nothing. But Han-soo had known her for 30 years. He could see the anger burning behind her calm expression. "The Calvary have promoted her," Han-soo continued. "She is being celebrated, honored. They are using this incident to send a message to every species in the galaxy. They are saying that humans can be hurt without consequences. That our children can be beaten in public places and nothing will happen. What are my orders, Admiral?" Han-soo slid a data chip across his desk. Kang picked it up without looking at it. "Officially, you and your team will be on extended training exercises in the Outer Rim, far from any major colonies, far from any witnesses. You will maintain radio silence for operational security. And unofficially?" Han-soo leaned back in his chair. He looked tired, old, but his voice was strong and certain. "Unofficially, Commander, I want you to remind the galaxy why they call us Deathworlders." Kang put the chip in her pocket. "What information do we have on the target?" "Commander Tyrus Voss is currently stationed at the Calvary 4 military base on their homeworld. It is one of the most heavily defended locations in the galaxy. 3 orbital defense platforms. Constant patrol flights. Ground forces numbering in the hundreds of thousands. She lives in a private estate outside the main complex. Security assessment? Impossible. That is what our analysts say. The base is impossible to penetrate. The planet is impossible to reach without being detected. The mission is impossible to complete." Kang almost smiled. "Almost. Impossible is what we do, Admiral." "I know. That is why I am asking you." Han-soo stood and walked to his window. Earth hung in the darkness outside, blue and green and beautiful. I am authorizing a team of your choosing. Maximum 12 operators. You will have access to any equipment you need, any resources, any support. Timeline? 72 hours from mission start. After that, political pressure will make this operation impossible to continue hiding. Kang nodded slowly. And when we reach the target? What are my rules of engagement? Hansu turned to face her. His eyes were hard. No witnesses. No traces. Complete the mission by any means necessary. He paused. And when you're done, I want them to know it was us. I want them to understand that this was not an accident. This was not a random attack. This was humanity's answer to what they did. Understood, Admiral. One more thing. Hansu's voice softened slightly. The child. Park Yuna. She is recovering physically, but she has nightmares every night. She screams in her sleep. She's afraid of aliens now. Afraid of everyone who's not human. Kang's expression finally changed. Just for a moment. Something dark and dangerous flickered in her eyes. She is 7 years old, Hansu said. She was looking at pretty lights. And now she is afraid of the universe. I understand, Admiral. Do you? Do you truly understand what I am asking you to do? Kang met his gaze directly. You are asking me to send a message. You are asking me to make the galaxy understand that there are lines that cannot be crossed. You are asking me to protect every human child, everywhere, by showing what happens to those who hurt them. Hansu nodded slowly. That is exactly what I am asking. Then consider it done. She turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped. Admiral, the team I select, they will need to understand that this mission may be one way. The chances of extraction are low. The chances of survival are lower. I know. Choose people who understand that. Choose people who volunteer knowing the cost. I already have 12 names in mind. They will all volunteer. Every single one of them. How can you be so certain? Kang looked back at him. And now she did smile, though it was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator. Because I showed them the video, she said. Because they all have children of their own. Brothers and sisters. Nieces and nephews. They looked at that little girl bleeding on the floor, and they saw their own families. They saw what they would want done if it had been their child. She opened the door. We ship out in 6 hours. The quiet ones will be ready. Then she was gone. Hansu stood alone in his office for a long time. He looked at the data chip slot on his desk where the mission files had been stored. He thought about what he had just authorized. He thought about the lives that would be risked. The lives that might be lost. He thought about Park Yuna, 7 years old, crying in her sleep because a monster had hurt her for no reason. He made his decision again. The same decision he had made before. The only decision he could make. Some things could not be forgiven. Some things could not be ignored. Some things demanded an answer that words could not provide. The galaxy wanted to treat humans like prey, like victims, like lesser beings who could be hurt without consequence. They were about to learn how wrong they were. On the lower decks of the Indomitable, Commander Kang Ji-won gathered her team. 12 soldiers, 12 volunteers, 12 people willing to die if necessary to deliver humanity's message. Kelhurst Prime was a fortress world. The planet hung in space like a green jewel, surrounded by 3 massive orbital defense platforms. Each platform bristled with weapons powerful enough to destroy entire fleets. Thousands of patrol ships flew constant patterns around the planet. Scanners searched every inch of space for anything that did not belong. The cavalry had spent centuries building these defenses. They believed their homeworld was untouchable. They believed no enemy could ever reached their surface without being detected and destroyed. They were wrong. The human insertion team traveled aboard a small ship called the Silent Wind. It was painted black and built to absorb sensor signals rather than reflect them. No weapons, no shields, just speed and stealth. Commander Kan Ji-won sat in the pilot's chair, watching data scroll across her screens. Behind her, 12 operators prepared their equipment in total silence. They had not spoken for 3 days. There was nothing to say. They all knew the mission. They all knew the risks. Lieutenant Yun Tai-woo was second in command. He was a young man, only 32, but he had already served in more operations than soldiers twice his age. He moved through the cabin, checking weapons and gear, making sure everything was perfect. Sergeant Bae Suji handled their electronics. She could hack any system, disable any alarm, open any door. Her fingers moved across her equipment like a musician playing an instrument. The rest of the team were equally skilled. Each one was the best at what they did. Each one had volunteered knowing they might never come home. Approaching Comet Shadow, Kong announced quietly. 30 minutes to drop point. The Silent Wind had been traveling for 5 days, using a comet as cover. The comet's tail created interference that hid their ship from Calvary sensors. It was a trick that should not have worked. The Calvary were supposed to be too advanced for such simple tactics, but the Calvary had a weakness. They had never faced a true predator species before. Humans had evolved on Earth, a world where everything wanted to kill them. They had developed tricks and tactics over millions of years of survival. They knew how to hide, how to hunt, how to strike from darkness. The Calvary had evolved on a peaceful world with no natural predators. They had never needed to learn fear. They had never needed to watch the shadows. That was about to change. The drop pods were small, shaped like rocks. When they fell from the ship, they would look exactly like natural debris breaking away from the comet. The Calvary sensors would mark them as harmless and ignore them. "Final check," Lieutenant Yoon said. "Sound off." 12 voices confirmed ready status. Kang stood from her chair. She would stay with the ship, maintaining position for extraction. If extraction was even possible. "You know the mission," she said. "You know the target. Get in. Complete the objective. Get out, if you can. If you cannot get out, make sure the mission is completed anyway. Understood, Commander. One more thing." Kang's voice hardened. "When you reach the target, I want you to look her in the eyes. I want you to tell her why we came. I want her to know exactly what she did and exactly why she's dying for it." Lieutenant Yu nodded. "She will know. Then go, and come back alive if you can." The team climbed into their drop pods. The doors sealed. The launch systems armed. Drop in 3, 2, 1. Drop. 12 pods fell toward Calvarus Prime, looking like nothing more than rocks tumbling through space. The descent took 3 hours. The pods fell through the upper atmosphere, heating up on the outside but staying cool within. They landed in a forest 20 kilometers from the target zone, scattered across a wide area to avoid detection. Lieutenant Yoon was the first to emerge. He checked his equipment, confirmed his position, and activated his communication implant. "All units, report status." 11 voices responded. Everyone had landed safely. Everyone was ready. They moved through the night like ghosts. The Calvary forest was different from Earth forests. The trees were taller, with purple leaves and silver bark. The air smelled strange, like copper and flowers mixed together. Small creatures with too many legs scattered away from the humans as they passed. The team moved in complete silence. They had trained for years to make no sound when they moved. Even their breathing was controlled, quiet, invisible. Sergeant Bae took point with her scanner, checking for sensors and patrols. The Calvary had security measures throughout the forest, but they were designed to detect large groups and vehicles. A small team of humans, moving slowly and carefully, slipped right through. They reached the edge of the military base at midnight local time. The base was massive, covering several square kilometers. Lights blazed from every building. Vehicles moved along roads. Thousands of Kelvar soldiers went about their duties, but the team was not interested in the base. Their target was the estate beyond it. Commander Tyreth Voss lived in a private compound outside the main complex. It was a reward for her long service. A beautiful home surrounded by gardens and security systems. 8 guards patrolled the perimeter at all times, walking predictable patterns around the walls. Lieutenant Yoon studied the patterns through his scope. The guards changed every 4 hours. They walked the same routes every time. They never looked up. They never looked down. They just walked and walked, confident that no enemy would ever reach this place. "I count 8 guards," Yoon whispered. 4 on the north wall, 4 on the south. Patrol rotation every 12 minutes. Security systems? Sergeant Bay asked. Motion sensors along the walls. Cameras at every corner. Pressure plates on the ground near the main entrance. I can disable them. Give me 60 seconds once we breach. Understood. Team 2, you have the south guards. Team 1 takes north. Synchronize kills. No sound. No survivors. The team split into 2 groups. They moved around the estate, taking positions in the darkness. They waited. They watched. They counted patrol patterns down to the second dot at exactly 0300 local time. They struck. Lieutenant Yoon gave the signal. 6 operators moved at once, 3 from each direction. They crossed the open ground in seconds, moving faster than any Calvari could track. The first guard died before he knew anyone was there. A knife slid between his scales, cutting deep into his throat. He dropped without making a sound. The second guard turned at exactly the wrong moment. Strong hands grabbed his head and twisted. His neck broke with a quiet crack. Guards 3 and 4 fell together, killed by 2 operators working in perfect coordination. They moved like dancers, each knowing exactly where the other would be, striking at the same instant. On the south wall, the other team was just as efficient. 4 guards. 4 kills. Less than 10 seconds total. Sergeant Bay was already at the main security panel, her tools working fast. Alarms died. Cameras went dark. Motion sensors shut down. "We are clear," she reported. 60 seconds exactly. The team gathered at the main door. Lieutenant Yoon checked his watch. They were ahead of schedule. Everything was going perfectly. Too perfectly. He pushed down the worry and focused on the mission. The door opened silently. The team flowed inside like water, moving room to room, clearing each one. The house was large and expensively decorated. Art from a dozen worlds hung on the walls. Furniture made from rare materials filled every space, but no guards inside. No servants. No witnesses. Commander Voss lived alone in her estate. She was too proud to have servants, too confident to have guards inside her own home. She believed her position made her untouchable. She was about to learn otherwise. Her bedroom was on the upper floor. Lieutenant Yoon led the way up the stairs, each step silent, each movement controlled. Behind him, his team spread out to cover all exits. The bedroom door was made of heavy wood. It was not locked. Why would it be? Who would dare enter the bedroom of a Kelvari commander? Yoon pushed the door open slowly. Commander Tyreth Voss lay in her bed, sleeping peacefully. Her forearms were spread across expensive sheets. Her scales rose and fell with each breath. She looked peaceful, content. Safe. Yoon moved to stand beside her bed. He waited until his team was in position. Then he reached down and placed his hand over her mouth. Voss woke instantly. Her eyes snapped open. She saw a human face inches from her own, lit only by the dim glow of night vision equipment. She tried to scream, but the hand clamped down tight. "Do you remember?" Yoon whispered in perfect Kalvari language. "The child you struck?" Voss's eyes went wide. Terror flooded through her body. Real terror. The kind she had never felt before in her entire life. "Her name is Park Yuna. She is 7 years old. She needed 12 stitches to close the wound you gave her." Yoon's voice was calm, almost gentle, like he was discussing the weather. "You called her a filthy Deathworlder spawn. Your government promoted you for hurting her. They gave you medals. They called you a hero." Voss tried to speak, tried to beg, tried to explain, but the hand stayed firm. "We have a message for you. A message for the Kelvari. A message for the entire galaxy." Yoon leaned closer until his lips were almost touching her ear. "Touch our children, and there is nowhere you can hide. Hurt our families, and we will find you. No matter how powerful you think you are, no matter how many guards you have, no matter how far you run." He pulled back slightly so she could see his eyes. "We are humans. We are Deathworlders. And we never, ever forget." The knife was quick. Voss did not suffer. The blade cut clean, severing her neck in a single stroke. Her body went limp. Her eyes stayed open. The Unified Council chamber on Nexus Station was the most impressive room in the galaxy. It was built like an ancient temple, with tall columns made of crystal and a ceiling that showed the stars outside. 12 species sent ambassadors here to make decisions that affected trillions of lives. The chamber had seen treaties signed and wars declared. It had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. Today, it would witness something no one had ever seen before. The chamber was shaped like a circle, with 12 sections arranged around a central platform. Each section belonged to a different species. The largest section, the one with the tallest chairs and the finest decorations, belonged to the Kelvari. They had held the position of leadership for 300 years. Ambassador Reth Kalos sat in the highest chair of the Kelvari section. He was old even by Kelvari standards, with faded green scales and cloudy amber eyes. He had served on the council for over a century. He had seen humans join the galactic community and had always considered them a minor species, barely worth attention. He was about to change his opinion. The emergency session had been called to discuss reports from Kelvaris Prime. Something had happened at Commander Voss's estate. The details were unclear. Security forces were investigating, but Ambassador Kalos was not worried. Whatever had happened, it was surely nothing serious. "We are gathered today," Kalos began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "to discuss renewed trade negotiations with." The main doors opened. Every head in the chamber turned to look. Captain Oh Sung-ho walked in alone. He was the human ambassador to the Unified Council, appointed specifically because other species found him uncomfortable to deal with. He was tall for a human, with a shaved head and eyes that never seemed to blink. He had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat, and he still moved like one. Under his arm, he carried a sealed container. "Ambassador, oh," Kalos said with obvious irritation. This session was not scheduled to include human participation. "You were not invited. You must leave immediately." Sung-ho did not respond. He did not even look at Kalos. He simply walked to the center of the chamber, to the speaking platform where important announcements were made. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. The other ambassadors watched with confusion. This was not normal. This was not protocol. Humans did not simply walk into council sessions uninvited. "Security," Kalos called out. "Remove this human at once." Guards moved toward the platform. But Sung-Ho held up one hand, and something his expression made them hesitate, made them afraid. "I have a delivery," Sung-Ho said. His voice was calm and steady. "A message from the people of Earth to the Unified Council. I suggest you let me deliver it before you do anything you might regret." Kalos leaned forward in his chair. "A message? What kind of message requires you to interrupt an official session? What could possibly be so important?" Sung-Ho placed the container on the platform. He entered a code on its surface. There was a soft hiss as the seal released. "This kind of message," he said. The lid opened. Inside, preserved perfectly in stasis fluid, was the severed head of Commander Tyreth Voss. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. Then chaos erupted. Ambassador Kalos shot to his feet, his forearms waving wildly. Other ambassadors screamed. Some fled toward the exits. Security guards drew weapons but did not know where to point them. The chamber filled with noise and panic. Through it all, Captain Sung-Ho stood perfectly still. He waited. He watched. He let them see what they needed to see. Finally, Kalos found his voice. "What is the meaning of this? What have you done?" "I have done nothing," Sung-Ho replied. "Humanity has done something. We have delivered justice." "Justice?" Kalos's voice rose to a screech. "This is murder. This is an act of war. This is an atrocity." "No," Sung-Ho's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "This is a response to an atrocity. This is what happens when you hurt our children and expect no consequences." He looked around the chamber at each ambassador in turn. Some met his gaze. Most looked away. Commander Tyreth Voss struck a human child. A 7-year-old girl named Park, Yuna. She beat that child bloody in a public corridor for no reason except that the child accidentally touched her. Your laws protected Voss. Your government promoted her. You celebrated her as a hero. She had diplomatic immunity, Kalos argued. Our laws are clear. Council officers cannot be prosecuted for. Your laws do not apply to us anymore. The words hung in the air like thunder. Sung-Ho stepped closer to the cavalry section. Guards raised their weapons, but they did not fire. Something in the human's eyes stopped them. "Let me be very clear," Sung-Ho continued. "Humanity did not ask to join your unified council. We did not beg for your trade deals or your protection. You invited us. You wanted our resources, our soldiers, our technology. You thought we would be useful. You thought we would be obedient." He smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. "You forgot what we are." "You are Deathworlders," Kalos said, as if it were an insult. "Violent, dangerous, unstable." "Yes, exactly." Sung-Ho nodded. "We are Deathworlders. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages and supervolcanoes and predators that would give your species nightmares. We crawled out of a gravity well that should have crushed us. We breathed an atmosphere that should have poisoned us. We conquered a world where everything wanted us dead." He looked at Voss's head in its container. "And you thought you could hurt our children without consequences? You thought your laws and your immunity and your titles would protect you from us." He turned back to the council. "This is your only warning. If any species, under any law, ever harms a human child again, we will not file complaints. We will not request investigations. We will not negotiate or plead or beg for justice." His voice dropped to something cold and quiet. "We will come for you in the night. We will find you wherever you hide. And we will take payment in blood." Silence filled the chamber. Ambassador Kalos seemed to shrink in his chair. His scales had gone pale. His hands were shaking. He looked at the other ambassadors for support, but none of them would meet his eyes. "This is unacceptable," he finally managed to say. "The council will respond." You will do nothing. Sung-Ho cut him off. Because if the Council moves against humanity for this, we will burn Calvarus Prime. Then we will burn your colonies. Then we will find every official who protected Commander Voss, and we will do to them what we did to her. He began walking toward the exit. And make no mistake, he said over his shoulder, we have the capability to do exactly what I just described. Your defense platforms are impressive. Your fleets are large. But you have never faced an enemy like us. You have never fought something that evolved to be a predator. He reached the doors and paused. Humanity has been patient. We have been reasonable. We have tried to be good neighbors in this galaxy of yours. But patience has limits. Reason has limits. And when you hurt our children, those limits disappear. He looked back one final time. The head stays here. Put it somewhere everyone can see. Let it remind the galaxy what happens to those who touch our young. Then he walked out, leaving the container on the platform. Leaving Voss's dead eyes staring up at the ceiling. Leaving the most powerful beings in the galaxy sitting in terrified silence. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, an ambassador from a small species called the Velth raised her hand. She was trembling, but she forced herself to speak. Perhaps, she said quietly, perhaps we should discuss new protections for human citizens. Just to be safe. Other ambassadors nodded quickly. Yes, new protections. That seemed wise. That seemed very wise indeed. Ambassador Kalos wanted to argue. He wanted to demand revenge for this insult to Calvari honor. But when he looked at the other ambassadors, he saw no support. He saw only fear. Fear of the humans. Fear of the Deathworlders. Fear of what would happen if they made the same mistake again. He slumped back in his chair and said nothing. The session continued in a different tone than it had begun. No one discussed trade negotiations. No one discussed minor disputes between colonies. Instead, they discussed one thing and one thing only. How to make sure humanity never had a reason to do this again. Because now they understood something that had never been clear before. Humans were not just another species trying to find their place in the galaxy. Humans were not children who needed to be managed and controlled. Humans were predators. Ancient predators from a death world. And they had just shown exactly what predators did. When their young were threatened, the message had been delivered. The galaxy had received it loud and clear. Outside the council chamber, Captain Sung-Ho walked to his shuttle alone. His hands were steady. His expression was calm. He felt neither pride nor shame in what he had done. He felt only certainty. The certainty that Park Yuna and every human child like her would be safer now. The certainty that the galaxy would think twice before ever touching a human again. The certainty that humanity had drawn a line that could not be crossed. He climbed into his shuttle and set course for Earth behind him. The Council began drafting new laws. Laws that would give humans special protection. Laws that would make it a crime to harm human citizens under any circumstances. They called it the Human Protection Accords. It was passed unanimously. Even the Calvari voted yes, though they did so with bitter, terrified silence. The galaxy had changed. 1 month had passed since the head of Commander Tyrith Voss was delivered to the Unified Council. The galaxy was different now. Everyone could feel it. The old rules, the old assumptions, the old beliefs about how things worked. All of it had changed overnight. The Human Protection Accords became law exactly 1 week after Captain Sung-Ho's dramatic delivery. It was the first piece of legislation in galactic history named after a single species. Every ambassador had voted in favor, including the Calvari, who had no choice but to agree after what had happened. The accords were simple. Any harm to a human citizen, regardless of diplomatic status or local law, would be investigated by a joint tribunal. Any species or individual found guilty of harming humans would face severe punishment. No exceptions. No immunity. No excuses. Some species complained that this was unfair. Why should humans receive special treatment? What made them so important? But those complaints faded quickly whenever someone brought up the incident on Kelverus Prime. Whenever someone mentioned what humanity had done to the last person who hurt their child, the message was clear. Complain if you want, but remember what happens when you actually harm them on Earth. Life returned to something like normal. Park Doan and Quan Mai Ray continued their trading business, though they no longer traveled to dangerous stations far from human space. They stayed closer to home now, closer to safety. Little Park Yuno was recovering. The scar on her temple had faded to a thin white line, barely visible unless you knew where to look. She was back in school, playing with friends, laughing at jokes, being a normal 7-year-old girl. But some scars were harder to see. She still had nightmares sometimes. She still woke up crying, reaching for her parents in the dark. She still flinched when she saw aliens on the news, even friendly ones who had nothing to do with what had happened to her. Her parents held her during those moments. They told her she was safe. They told her she would always be safe. And now, for the first time, that promise was actually true. Admiral Choi Hansu retired from the United Earth Defense Force 6 months after the mission. There was no ceremony, no public announcement. He simply handed over command to his successor and went home to his family. Before he left, he wrote one final letter. It was addressed to the Park family. "Your daughter is safe," the letter read. "She will always be safe. Because when the galaxy looks at humanity now, they no longer see potential trading partners or convenient soldiers. They see what we have always been: protectors, predators, parents, and they are afraid." Dohan read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it away somewhere safe. He never showed it to Yuna. She did not need to know the details of what had been done in her name. She only needed to know that she was loved. Commander Kang Ji-won and her team returned to active duty. They received no medals, no public recognition, no mention in any official record. The mission to Kelverus Prime simply never happened, as far as history was concerned. But in special operations circles, they became legends. Stories spread through whispered conversations and knowing looks. The quiet ones, the team that proved humanity could strike anywhere, at any time, against any target. When new recruits asked about the mission, veteran soldiers would just smile and shake their heads. "Some things are better left unspoken," they would say. But remember this: humanity protects its own, always. The Kelvari never recovered their former power. It started slowly. Other species began questioning why the Kelvari had held leadership of the council for so long. If they could be penetrated by a small team of humans, if their defenses could be bypassed so easily, were they really as powerful as they claimed? The permanent chair was abolished within 3 months. A new system was created where leadership rotated between all species equally. The Kelvari fought against this change, but they had no support. Ambassador Reth Kalos became famous, though not in the way he wanted. Someone had recorded his reaction when Voss's head was revealed. The footage showed his face going from arrogance to confusion, to pure terror in less than 3 seconds. The clip spread across the galaxy. People made jokes about it. Kalos' face became slang for extreme fear. For the moment when someone realizes they have made a terrible mistake, Kalos resigned from the council within a year. He spent his remaining days in a quiet estate on Kelverus Prime, far from public life, trying to forget the day that humans had shown the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. He never succeeded. As for Captain Oh Sung-ho, the human ambassador who had delivered Voss's head to the council, he continued serving in his position for another 5 years. Other ambassadors treated him with careful respect. They smiled when he smiled. They agreed when he spoke. They never, ever disagreed with him about anything important. He knew why. They were afraid of him. Afraid of what he represented. Afraid of what might happen if they made him angry. That was fine with him. Fear was a useful tool. And if it protected his people, he was happy to use it. Years passed. Decades passed. The incident on Harmony's Edge faded from immediate memory, but it never disappeared. It became a story that parents told their children. A legend that spread across the galaxy. Do not harm the humans, parents would say. They come from a death world. They seem peaceful, but they never forget. They never forgive. If you hurt one of them, especially one of their young, they will find you. It does not matter how powerful you are. It does not matter where you hide. Children would listen with wide eyes and ask, but why? Why are they so dangerous? And the parents would look out at the stars and remember the stories they had heard. Because they evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. Because they survived when they should have died. Because they learned that the most dangerous creature in any environment is the one that protects its family. Park Yuna grew up strong and healthy. She never became a soldier or a diplomat or anyone famous. She became a teacher, working with children on a peaceful colony world, helping them learn and grow and dream. She rarely talked about what had happened to her as a child. It was ancient history now, something from a different time. But sometimes, when she looked at her students, she would remember how fragile children were, how innocent, how easily they could be hurt, and she would feel grateful. Grateful that someone, somewhere, had decided that hurting children was not acceptable. Grateful that humanity had stood up when no one else would. She did not know the details. She did not need to. She only knew that her father had held her in that corridor, covered in blood, and promised her that everything would be okay. He had kept that promise, and the galaxy would never forget how the Unified Council continued to function, though it operated differently now. Human diplomats were treated with a mixture of respect and caution. Trade agreements were negotiated fairly. Disputes were resolved peacefully, not because anyone trusted humans, not because anyone particularly liked them, because everyone remembered what happened when you did not treat them fairly. Everyone remembered the head in the stasis container. Everyone remembered the cold eyes of Captain Sung-ho as he delivered humanity's message. Some called it fear. Some called it respect. Some called it the natural result of billions of years of evolution creating a species built for survival at any cost. Whatever you called it, the result was the same. Humans were safe. Human children were safe. And anyone who thought about changing that situation would think twice. Then 3 times, then decide it was simply not worth the risk. In the end. That was all that mattered. In a small apartment on Earth, in a city called Seoul. An old man named Park Don sat by a window watching the sunset. His wife Mai sat beside him, holding his hand as she had for over 50 years. Their daughter had called earlier that day, showing them pictures of her classroom, her students, her life. She was happy. She was healthy. She was everything they had ever hoped. She would become. Du-Han thought about the day on Harmony's Edge. He thought about holding his bleeding daughter and feeling helpless and desperate. He thought about the promise he had made to himself in that moment. He had kept that promise. Not alone. Not by himself. But with the help of others who understood what it meant to be a parent. What it meant to protect the innocent. What it meant to be human. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, among the stars, billions of beings lived their lives under the protection of laws that had been written in blood. Human blood. Calvary blood. The blood of a child and the blood of a monster. It was not a perfect galaxy. It never would be. But it was safer than it had been before. Safer for children. Safer for families. Safer for everyone who had ever felt small and helpless against those with power. And that, Dohan thought, was enough. That was everything. He squeezed his wife's hand as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems, new reasons to worry about the universe and everyone in it. But tonight, he would sit in peace and remember that his daughter was safe. Tonight, he would remember that humanity had drawn a line in the stars. Tonight, he would remember that some promises were worth any price to keep. The darkness came. The stars appeared. And the galaxy turned on, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings that lived within it. But somewhere, in the quiet corners of space, in the shadows where criminals once felt safe,